Alrighty. So we are live on LinkedIn. Just gonna let this load, let people get here.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. I'm checking it out to make sure we are good on the app, and we are live. Perfect. Okay. Hey everyone, thank you for coming to our LinkedIn Live today. We are super glad you are here. If you are viewing this, go ahead and you can click the like button so people know you're watching. If you want to give a reshare so your audience can also see it, that would be great. And don't forget to follow the Carolina Handling page as well, so that way you can keep up with things. So we've got Chief Operating Officer Joe Perkins with us today, and we are excited to have him here.
Yeah, thank you. So as Kayla said, Joe Perkins, Chief Operating Officer here at Carolina Handling. I am super excited to be here and to get to discuss these topics, as this has been a passion of mine. And we've learned so much from recent disruptions that has continued to help us create plans and look at business continuity and things like that relative to very similar challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about building resilient supply chains today. And I think what we need to do is we really need to go back in time, right?
Okay.
I want to go back almost 5 years, which, that seems crazy to even say 5 years, when in March of 2020, when COVID happened and everything kind of shut down and we had that major supply chain disruption. So we're still dealing with some of the effects today, but we have learned valuable lessons. So first, I think I want to touch on this global pandemic and how it impacted the supply chain industry and what Carolina Handling saw and how they reacted. Can we start there?
Yeah, we absolutely can start there. I think it's a great place. So the COVID era definitely introduced challenges for the supply chain. I think first and probably the most lingering disruption was around labor. And whether it's labor shortages that were the result of the exodus of folks that were retiring due to COVID. Many folks found during COVID they like spending more time with their family. And so we've seen a greater desire to have that work-life balance. We laugh about a lot of the generational effects that are in the workplace, but it's real. When we look at many of today's associates in the workplace, they don't want burnout. They don't want excessive overtime. And in previous eras, generations, if you will, there was a lot of pride in the amount of hours that you work, the overtime that you put in. But I think today's workforce is much more focused on quality versus quantity. So with that, they like finding freedom and flexibility and engagement in the workplace, and they're not scared to take risk and try new places. So whether it's choosing to work from home or having flexible work schedules, labor certainly looks different today. Another thing that I think we learned, or something that really impacted the supply chain, was people who had a single source supply. And prior to COVID, there were great relationships, honored by handshakes and things like that, where that single source was the source for their products. You fast forward to 2020, and some of those suppliers were closed, and some of them couldn't keep up with the demand that was being forced through some of the retail chains and things like that. So it led a lot of the companies, especially ones that we service, into looking at what does redesign of their supply chain look like, and even redesign of some of their products so that they could incorporate an alternative or a secondary supply. The other thing that I think it led to was we saw inventory levels just boom. And you started to see people have to expand their facilities or move into larger ones to be able to accommodate the additional inventory or the new lines that they were carrying. And then I think the last thing that really came out of COVID that we've seen is this consumer expectation. It's drastically changed. I mean, we used to be okay with getting things in weeks or maybe even months. And now we expect that things are going to be delivered in a couple of days or maybe even a few hours, which again drives inventory and production levels and their delivery network. So with many companies needing to get there just in time, they've really adjusted how they are getting their products and then even how they're moving them downstream to their customers. So it's really caused us and our customers to look at the supply chain much differently.
Yeah, that's a great point because even myself, I want things instantly. When I order something, I want it within the next day or 2 days to show up at my door. And so that really did come out of COVID in that era because I would order stuff constantly. I was trying a new hobby, I feel like every other week. So that's a great point. And then you also mentioned that customers are looking at their approach differently. So can you kind of give me an idea of how that's changed?
Yeah, I think, COVID was extremely disruptive. And so we want to prevent as many disruption as we can. I think it caught us off guard and it definitely taught us some important lessons, but it really all leads back to, do we have our labor strategy optimized, and where can they incorporate better processes or automation? How are they eliminating waste? And then ultimately evaluating future threats to keep from going into a similar disruption like what we did with COVID.
And we've talked about, you touched on labor and workers and different generations working. We saw that a lot of maybe an older workforce left, they decided to retire early. But then we still have this labor shortage. And you mentioned it multiple times. So, Carolina Handling, we've evolved from a forklift only provider to a one-stop shop for all of warehouse and distribution needs. So can we touch on that? Like, how are these labor shortages and increasing wages influencing the push to automation?
Yeah. So I want to start off by saying automation is not a bad thing. I think some folks have this fearful view of automation because the thought is that I'm going to be replaced by a bot. But I tell people very frequently, automation has been around forever. If you just look back at the cartoon, The Jetsons, I mean, we had robots running around at that point in time. But we are dealing with a real issue here in America when it comes to labor and the labor shortage. The current birth rate does not support replacing mom and dad in the workplace. And there's a ton of research on this. And it really has two impacts. The cost to attract and retain labor and the ability to meet increasing demand. And then with that, the labor pool shrinking literally, many employers are resulting to employee wages as a retention strategy. Obviously, you have to keep your associates to be able to build and deliver the products that you're creating. So, but secondly, as demand is increasing, companies really need to be able to keep pace with what the consumer wants. Otherwise, the buyer may seek to find faster delivery windows. And when we look at automation and process improvement as a way to supplement our workforce, ultimately it makes us more productive and we're able to control costs. And then the output of this is exponential when it's coupled with automation.
Absolutely. I think that is a big concern. You hear the word automation and you think replacing a job. And like you said, that's just not true because you have all of these opportunities for automation to really make the workplace better and obviously help out to meet consumer needs. So what strategies have you implemented to address those labor challenges through automation?
Yeah, so we obviously have our own challenges. I will say, first and foremost, we are consistently using the Kaizen submissions from our associates. We use those to look at process improvement and technologies that our associates may suggest to help them streamline functions or remove wasteful activity. Also want to note that through the Kaizen process, we see a lot greater engagement from our associates in trying to help us look for ways to automate or to improve processes. I will tell you that today we're exploring artificial intelligence and how it can decrease the amount of time that is spent searching for items, as well as helping us improve our customer engagement. We've implemented many technologies in our facilities and I mean, these are technologies that we take to our customers to help them improve, but we're utilizing them to improve our distribution of things like parts and rentals and other items that we move to our customers. So we're not really approaching it any differently than what we suggest to our customer. We're consistently evaluating our supply chain, looking for how we can eliminate the potential for disruption. I will say that fortunately, prior to COVID, we had already begun this process and a lot around leaning our organization. And fortunately, that allowed us to stay fully functional during that period. Had its challenges, but the fact that we were looking at how disruptions could affect us and what pieces and tools were out there that we could leverage, we had somewhat inoculated ourselves relative to the COVID pandemic.
Absolutely. And just kind of like touching on that too, through the whole Kaizen process, that's something that Carolina handling. Lean management is huge with us. We hadn't discussed it before, but I think that could even be something good to touch on, is lean management in the workplace and how staying lean is important to prevent some of this.
Yeah, no, for sure. So we actually have a group that we've built out internally that our customers have access to. Our goal is to go in and be that set of eyes that sees wasteful activity throughout a customer's facility. And so through those engagements, and many customers have taken us up on it, we're able to help them improve workflows, improve processes, write standard work, things that really give them a path forward on their lean journey. And then ultimately, our goal is to help the customer see the benefits of lean so that they want to own that culture and then start to build it internally.
Awesome. And when we're talking about automation, when somebody says automation, they think money. That's the first thing that comes to mind. And we hear a lot, oh, that's not in our budget.
Yep.
What is your response to that to customers?
So there are some levels of automation that undoubtedly are a lot of money. And what I would say is that, customers are starting to embrace even the cost of automation today. But when it comes to budgets, what I'll tell you is that automation is already in the customer's expense lines somewhere, whether it's in labor savings or reduced costs, or if it can help grow revenues relative to being able to meet consumer demand, et cetera. It is typically already in their budget. We just have to help them understand where it is. We have a lot of customers that take advantage of leasing automation. And what we see in a lot of cases is, generally speaking, the savings will cover the lease payments. And so that becomes very attractive to our customers. I will say that I think customers have made this shift because prior to COVID, they could go and hire associates very quickly to meet demand. And then I mentioned earlier, with the labor challenges that we have, being able to just go out and get someone to meet demand isn't necessarily the case. So we're starting to see that customers are starting to automate pieces of their business so that they don't have these peaks and valleys relative to the labor demand. A bot, it doesn't always solve the challenge. We like to stress that you need to optimize prior to automation. You were talking about lean just a minute ago. We do not want to see customers take automation and build bad processes into automation, because ultimately, whether it's cost or whatever it may be, you're just building it back into your budget. So
yeah, that's a good point. You don't want to automate a bad system there, because then you're going to have more issues on top of that. So, after COVID and during COVID, this shift to purchasing things online, on-demand buying. How do you help manage clients through that? Because we're still seeing people want it there the next day.
Yeah, they do. And a lot of our retailers felt this. I mean, I think Amazon and folks like Amazon have really carved out this expectation of, hey, I can have it this afternoon at 5 o'clock. But we actually have a few success stories just in the past couple of years where we've helped some major customers for ours. One was a major yarn retailer that saw a spike of orders during COVID. I guess people couldn't go to Michael's or to Home Goods and buy their yarn. So they started placing these orders online. And we were able to go in and really help them understand how to improve their processes. Another one is we've got a key plumbing retailer in the South Carolina upstate that wanted to maximize their efficiencies. And while these stories are slightly different, they both speak to the fact that they wanted to reduce manual processes and they wanted to maximize associate efficiency. And then in both cases, they also gained greater space utilization of the facilities that they were in. So we're continuing to see that customers are benefiting from several key technologies when it comes to throughput and matching that consumer demand. I will tell you that goods to person systems, I mean, it seems like every day we're getting a call around these technologies. Some of these goods to person technologies are things like robots that drive the efficiency of the skilled labor in the workplace and then greatly reduce travel back and forth to pack stations and things like that. We see some of these goods to person technologies that are able to shrink the footprint of where those goods are stored in the facility and give them more space to be able to, whether it's expanding inventories or giving them greater flow through their building, again, helping them. Conveyor and sortation, I mean, it's been around for a long time. I would say decades, but more customers are starting to lean into the value of what conveyor and sortation can do for them, because now it's not forklifts and people traversing the warehouse. You're able to leverage conveyor to move products. And then ultimately, with the number of parcel shipping lanes that we're seeing in facilities, being able to do that with sortation has really helped. Another thing that is also helping throughput today is a lot of the technologies we're seeing when we go to trade shows. Artificial intelligence is now being implemented at the end of robotic arms. And we're actually seeing that customers are able to palletize and depalletize product. Again, a very manual process before, and now it's being done through automation. And then in other places, we're seeing where they're able to apply artificial intelligence and actually pick products for orders, where it is picking the product out of a tote, it's putting in a packing label, it's pushing the box closed. Like, all of this is being done with robots. But in each case, we're seeing that it's coming from customers, again, seeking to meet the customer demand around throughput. They're gaining greater efficiency from their associates. They're maximizing their facility. I will note, though, the space constraint. I don't think a lot of people look at automation and things like that relative to how they can also shrink their footprint. Many of these buildings were busting during COVID with inventory levels, and we talked about people adding suppliers and adding inventory to maintain their level of production. And when we go in and we put some of these technologies in place, and I mean, when I look at vertical lift modules and we're taking 2,000 square feet down to 200 square feet, it really impacts the way that they can leverage their facility to move products and be much more nimble to be able to respond to their customers.
Absolutely. When I go into a facility and I've seen the VLMs up, I'm like, wow, that literally took all this space and put it right there.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think about. And then going back to the robots as well, I think I went and I dropped in the chat that link to the case study. So if anybody's watching, if you want to read more about that, it's in there. But I even think looking at the robots there, seeing how they made it just so much more efficient all the steps that a worker would take, an associate
Oh
would
yeah,
take.
yeah,
And it just cut that process out. It didn't cut the associate out. The
right.
associate was still necessary. And that's what we're saying with automation is the associate was still there working. It just helped, one, make their workday better because it's cutting out steps, and two, made the process
I
even
think that is
faster.
such a key point, Kelly. I'm telling you, the number of times that we implement technologies within our customers and you see the employee engagement and morale actually go up. I mean, whether it's dealing with the wear and tear on the body from traversing a warehouse or just the ability for them to be more productive in their daily function, we believe that the associate actually benefits from these technologies. Obviously, the end customer benefits in the product and the service that our customers provide, but the associate is absolutely a beneficiary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, while we're touching on this too, we talked about, Carolina Handling's transition and evolution, not just forklift only provider, but we also provide service to all of these things afterwards too. So aftermarket, we didn't even touch on this, but maybe we should, servicing
Yeah,
afterwards. That's
yeah.
a huge part of it.
So what's wild is, maybe this even goes back to some of the fear of implementation and adoption of automation is who's going to service this for us. We have really put a lot of effort behind training our technicians to be able to respond because, I mean, today within our footprint, we're typically on site in an hour or less. And when you're talking about some of the complexities that come with automation and some of the companies that they were buying them from, in times prior, you saw an engineer or a technician having to book a plane, get to the site. They were there for a couple of days. It cost piles of money to be able to get your stuff serviced. And with our teams, I mean, we actually have a regional training site for automation right here in our territory where we're pouring into our technicians around conveyor, sortation, vertical lift modules, robotics, you name it. The other really cool thing about us doing this is that many of our technicians see new and innovative career paths. And so these technologies are really interesting to them. And so they're able to expand the depth and breadth of their knowledge when it comes to keeping their customers up and running. But yeah, I mean, it's here. We want to be able to support our customer from end to end. And whether that's the design of the system, whether it's consulting on lean or their automation journey, we want to make sure that we've been able to check every single box for our customers so that they have a great experience, not only with automation, but with Carolina Handling.
Absolutely. That's a great point. That's what I've heard so much is just that aftermarket support that we're here to offer.
Absolutely.
So I think too, I mean, just simply putting, is automation here to stay?
Yeah, no question. I think the dependency on automation and the adoption is growing each and every day. And we're seeing it through many of our customers and the way that our conversations are changing, also in the way that they view us today. I think the really cool thing about Carolina Handling, a shameless plug, but as an integrator, we're able to pull numerous technologies and create this ecosystem within a customer. So whenever you're doing that, we ensure that the technologies are going to speak to each other and that they're going to work together, versus pulling a technology from over here with one company and another one from over here. But going back to your question around, is automation here to stay? We've learned so much through the lessons that COVID taught us. If you have the right processes in place, you're evaluating your suppliers relative to the support that they provide and the continuity. You leverage automation where it's feasible and it's the right solution. And then ultimately, you create this cadence of reviewing these processes and vulnerabilities around these processes and these suppliers. So yes, automation is here to stay, but I will say it's here to stay, coupled with these other things that we've discussed today. I think the bigger question is probably what's the next piece of technology that is going to come to market that will provide even greater protection from these disruptions, because I know not only Carolina Handling, but all of our customers, we don't want to go through another COVID. We don't want to go through another disruption of sorts. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's great. I just want everyone to know that's watching. I have dropped Joe's LinkedIn also in the comments as well if you want to connect with him, and if you have, any further questions, or maybe you want to talk about some needs that your company has. He said he's willing to
Always.
discuss.
Always love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk about all of this, because it is a huge topic, and we have come such a long way from 2020. That's almost 5 years away. Or you
Sounds
said
crazy.
4.5, and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
So we appreciate you being here, for taking the time to talk with us, and really put this message out there.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.